Welcome to the GenX Experience, the podcast that celebrates the unique journey of 80s kids navigating midlife. I'm your host, Blythe Alperin. Each episode, my guests and I will share with you the unique differences that define our generation and how we are navigating those differences in the real world. Join me for laughs, insights, and a sense of community. Let's embrace the GenX Experience together. Welcome to episode 24 of the GenX Experience. How fitting is it that we're starting 2025 off with episode 24? A little throwback, right? No. But yes, we're back with a new season, and after a little delay and a little holiday break, and we're introducing video. So some of you are listening to me, some of you are watching me. Hello, hi, how are you? I'm Blythe, your host for the GenX Experience, a 1974 Gen Xer. But let's get into it. So we're back. It's been a month since we've all welcomed, or maybe not welcomed, this new year. And have we all forgotten the goals that we set, or the resolutions, or the habits that we wanted to start in 2025? Because yes, there's so much pressure on us at the beginning of the year to do all these things, and then it becomes overwhelming. Well, that is why this month I wanted to focus on how to make goal setting manageable, and how to make creating new habits not feel so overwhelming, and also what to do when you feel that lack of motivation or procrastination, which is why we are going to be talking to Dr. Christiane Schroeter. She is a passionate business and wellness coach with a distinctive European flair. She focuses on helping women elevate their health and confidence, empower them to excel in both life and business. With a Ph.D. in health economics, Christiane works as professor of marketing, innovation, and entrepreneurship at one of the top U.S. universities, earning national and international awards for her teaching and research. She is also the host of the top 1% globally ranked Happy Healthy Hustle podcast, and host a vibrant community on Instagram and YouTube where she shares practical productivity tips and advice. Her book, How to Master Your Goals, a curated collection of one-page worksheets, launched as a #1 new release in adult education on Amazon. Known for her motivating let's do it attitude, Christiane is sought after speaker in business and wellness, and I'm so happy to have her on the podcast today. As you'll see in a few short seconds, she gave a lot of great information that is actionable and easy to implement into your life. So without further ado, let's get into the first episode of 2025. Christiane, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about productivity and planning and goals and all the things that we say we're going to do in the new year, and then by February, or even probably by the second week of January, people have kind of just let it go. So I wanted to talk to you about, like, what are your tips for not just making New Year's resolution, but for making goal planning a part of your normal everyday, every year life?
Well, it's a great question. And of course, we all have goals in our life, big ones, small ones, everyday ones. And my biggest tip about it is you kind of have to make the goals part of your personality. So step one is you have to write down maybe your goals, but then step two is also share those goals with people around you. The more you make your goals of something that you talk about, the more your mind and your friends, your family realize that this is something important to you, the more it becomes something of like, this is actually viable. I'm doing this right now. And of course, whenever we have something like this, especially when we start sharing the goals, people will then follow up on asking us about the goals. So this is step three, right? So you write down your goals, you share it with your friends. Step three is that maybe some of those friends might even turn into accountability partners. And then they will ask, how close did you get to writing that book that you wanted to write this year? How close did you get with that podcast that you wanted to launch? And all of a sudden, when you meet those friends, you're excited because you want to share progress with them. So these are all really setting you up for not just keeping the goal in your mind, but putting them on paper, putting them in the ears and the minds of others, and then also slowly chipping away and seeing progress.
I love that you talk about sharing it, because a lot of times when you hear people talk about setting goals, it feels so like everyone holds it so close to the vest. Like they might share it on social media, but I love the idea of sharing it with your family and friends and people that you know, want to hold you accountable, or that you can kind of go along the journey. Because I think it does help you kind of feel less overwhelmed and know that you have like this, support network backing you. And I think we forget to do that sometimes, especially as Gen Xers. Like we're really not good at asking for help. We're like, we got it, but we don't always have it. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, because you talked about, like, yes, writing it down, but I think that's where people get stuck, right? They'll write it down, but then they're like, okay, I have a goal, but they have no idea what to do, how to create those actionable steps. So what is your recommendation for, once you write your goals down and have shared them, to how do you make it easy to create actionable steps that can help you chip away at your goal? So by whatever date you want to achieve it, you can get there.
I just grabbed my backpack and actually want to show you. You're watching the video version of this. So this planner, it still has the original wrapper on it, is what I purchased. And nothing fancy. I purchased this at Target, right? So this could be my goal holding planner right here, which
Okay.
is really, really important. It actually has some sections for those goals right there. And then in addition to that, because it's great to get daily reminders on the go, and you might not always have your planner with you, you could even like create a little vision board in Canva. You could do this, of course, at home, where you're using images of something that represents your goals, and then you can take a picture of it with your phone and then set the background on your phone to that vision board. So whenever you open your phone, which is probably more often during the day than when you open your calendar, I would
Right.
think,
Yeah.
you are reminded about those goals, which could be, let's just say, for instance, your goal for 2025 is going to be to walk more or working out more. And while you wrote this in your calendar, it's like now it's not immediately on your mind because you put your calendar to your side, and maybe for a little while you can't even find your calendar. But when you open your phone and it has that vision board on there, you're immediately reminded. It's like, oh, that's true. I did plan on working out more and maybe taking those steps outside and going in the fresh air. Let's do it. And so what's really, really important is, especially at the beginning when we are trying something that is so new that you're not familiar with, that you are making it what we call top of mind, right? So in
Mhm.
marketing research, we call it top of mind awareness. You have to constantly bring it back until it really turns into a habit, until it turns into a routine. And in my book, which is called How to Master Your Goals, I call it a petite practice. You have to keep practicing and you have to make it small until that practice then becomes something that's part of your daily regime. And this is so important. Like, for instance, sometimes people are like, oh, I want to run a marathon. And I tell them, well, it's maybe, unless you're already a runner, unless you already have done it, break it down to something small, something petite, and make it so small that it's not going to be overwhelming, as you just said.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because people really just they don't. I think no one teaches you, at least back when we just talked about New Year's resolution, back when we were like growing up, it was just like, okay, make a resolution, and that was you didn't get any help after that. So most people, I think that's why most people fail, because they don't know what to do with once they've written it down. Speaking of like creating goals, do you find it's more useful to do it weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, or does it really depend on what works best for you?
No, that's a great question. So I kind of like to look at 90 days. I don't, I mean, I might have an annual goal, but 90 days is a good framework. And you can start with the 90 days and then break it down into a monthly, so a 30-day. and then break it down into a weekly, and then break it down into a daily. And that daily might then be, again, that petit practice, that French inspired small little habit that you take every day to reach ideally your 90-day goal. So let's, come back to this. Oh, I want to walk more, which is actually not an ideal goal because walking more is not really quantitatively descriptive. So maybe I want to walk by the end of March, right? I want to walk $10,000 steps every day,
Mhm.
right? So maybe you don't immediately start with 10,000. You might start, with 2,000. Here we are in January. You might start 2,000, right? So you're breaking it down and you eventually know you will get there. But maybe today in your daily calendar, in your weekly calendar, you're in the 1,000 step week. And then maybe as you're moving into the end of January, maybe you're beefing that up to 2,000 steps. So that by the time you reach that 90-day goal, you're much closer to the 10,000. And now this is really, really important because we sometimes don't feel like walking at all, right?
Mhm.
And you're like, this absolutely it's terrible weather outside. What in the world was I thinking? And I really don't feel like doing that at all. The worst thing that can happen is it's all right. You didn't do it on one day. You didn't walk at all. And then maybe not even on the second day. The worst thing is to think, well, now I didn't do it for 2 days, so I'm never ever going to get back into it, right? You got to pick it back up. Because if you don't pick it back up, of course, you will never get to your 90-day goal. But don't beat yourself up about the 2 days that didn't work out. Because just like, athletes or celebrities or actors, like people that perform at a very high level, they don't perform every day. An athlete doesn't have a game every day. They have rest days. Actors have rest days. So maybe that was a rest day for you. And then on the next day, the walking might just be also easier. So the most important thing is that you do you. You break down that 90-day goal in the way that you feel is going to be feasible for you to achieve. But at the same time, you also need to forgive yourself and give yourself permission that there are days when maybe you're not working on your goal, but indirectly you're still working on it because you're resting. Again, that rest might just be what your body needed on that day.
Right. And yes, I mean, we're like right now we're in winter, at least on this side of the continent. I know on the other side of the world, they're in summer. So, you know, we had this snow here in Atlanta last weekend and I have a dog, so I had to go outside. But did I necessarily get all my steps in? No. And that was okay with me because I was like, I'd rather not hurt myself and slip and slide than, or you could,
Mhm.
and sometimes just walking around your house doing, there's ways you can find it. But yes, it's good to remind yourself
Exactly.
we're all human. We're not perfect. We're not going to, take every step every day. And maybe one day you get 15,000 steps and the next day you only get two.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a treadmill under my desk. So there are other ways instead of leaving the house to add those steps, right? I have a really fun YouTube video where I'm walking on that treadmill there if you want to, check that out.
I'll
It's
put
on my
that in the show notes too so people can check it out.
yeah, and people are sometimes when they're on the YouTube calls with me, it's like, "Are you dancing?" It's like, "No, I'm actually getting my steps in." So there are other ways of adding steps as well. And I want to point something really, really important as well, especially with regard to working out, right? Sometimes people think that the working out is going to be like expensive because you need to buy all these things. And then you're already kind of a little bit in a hole because you're already invested in all these things. And it makes you feel guilty when you don't use it. So let's say you bought a workout equipment and it was already pricey, you spent money, but then you actually don't end up using it. It's the famous, I bought a stationary bike and now it's pretty stationary because I never go for it, right?
Yeah.
So be careful with that, because I think that Sometimes investing in fitness equipment, or I'm a business coach. Sometimes people invest in these really expensive programs and then they actually never log in and listen to any lesson of it. Be really careful when you do this because it makes us feel guilty and maybe even afraid and shameful of admitting that. In reality, we all have done this. We all spend money on things that we never use. It's
Yep.
totally fine to do that. But what you want to do is you want to learn from it. You don't want to do that again. So if you already have a treadmill sitting at home that you don't use, don't buy an elliptical trainer, right? So you need to think, how could I work out without spending so much money? How can I take a business program or a coach where I'm actually going to do something? Because the past thing didn't work. So maybe I need somebody that has more accountability features built in. So
Mhm.
it's fine to fail. It's fine to create something, that you feel would be amazing and doesn't work out. But just kind of look back and think also maybe with your goal is like, I tried this in the past, so why didn't I get there?
Yeah. And sometimes too, with like working out or taking a course, like figure out if you are going to like, maybe try it out. Like don't buy some
Love
equipment,
it.
maybe if somebody has, a stationary bike, try it and see if you like it, or there's tons of workouts on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because I think part of the problem too is if you buy some equipment, then you realize I actually don't like doing this.
Exactly.
You're not going to do it. And then it's just going to, yeah, be stationary or be where you hang your clothes. And the same with courses too, right? Look into the person, check them out on social media, make sure you vibe with them, because sometimes that's part of the issue too, is you're like, I thought this person was right for me. And then I realized it or not. And, everyone's different. But I think that's, it's a good reminder too, because I think people do feel bad. I bought something, I didn't use it, so I'm not going to try it again. I feel bad about myself, which kind of goes to our next topic of like motivation and procrastination. Cause I think the inner voices that we all have can either, make us procrastinate or cause us to have a lack of motivation, or sometimes they both interact. So if you're feeling like you've lost your mojo, so to say, you have no motivation, or procrastination is causing you to not be motivated, what's one easy step maybe that someone could take to kind of break past those feelings, which makes you feel worse about yourself too if you're like, I'm not doing what I want to be doing?
Yeah. So in my How to Master Your Goals book, I use worksheets. And the advantage of using a one-page worksheet is that it's immediate satisfaction. You fill out the worksheet and you actually got something done, right? So it's
Mhm.
it's it's progress on paper, and the writing, a lot of research studies have shown, actually put it more in your brain than just blatantly reading it and then wondering, what did I just read? So you're actually going through little exercises, activities in that workbook yourself. So step one would be, work with your learning style and then really utilize that your learning style to your best. So if you're somebody that likes listening to things, play around with that. If you're somebody that's more like, I like reading things, go with that. But what I would encourage you to do is, when you wanted to start a new habit, the most challenging thing is you don't know how that fits in your day because you're already so busy, right?
Right.
So let's come back to this business coach. You want to hire a business coach, but you're like, I don't even know when I would meet with that person, right? You have to find something else that you do in your day and then add that activity, if convenient, to the existing habit. We call it habit stacking, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, for instance, every Monday, you kind of work on your, let's say, on your sales funnel. So and then you sometimes struggle because you don't have anybody that helps you. And then you're like, wouldn't it be handy to have a business coach who could help me with my sales funnel and lining out lead magnets or getting my email list growing, etc. So that's maybe what you identify as an ideal time to have a business coach meeting. Or if you want to do the workout, right? The wellness, because I'm a business and wellness coach. I always
Mhm.
talk about both. So you want to walk. Well, then what is a good time for you to walk? Immediately add that to your calendar, your paper calendar, your online calendar, and then feel that because walking might work well, let's say if you are getting the mail, you're anyway leaving the house. So you may as well just before you pick up the mail from your mailbox, add on a little detour. And then on the way back, pick the mail from your mailbox and go inside the house. So you need to add it onto something you're already doing so it doesn't become this much of a, oh, now I have to do this type of thing, right?
Mhm.
And that makes it easier for you not to fall off the your mojo, how you called it, but rather actually look at the completion of a habit. And a tracker helps. So in my How to Master Your Goals book, I actually have an electronic tracker that people fill out. So whenever they complete something, the tracker gives you like a little smiley face, and
Nice.
that helps a lot too. It's a very psychological thing. It's like somebody gives you a high five.
Or when we were kids and we got stickers, and that was like
Yes,
a huge deal. So maybe, and I
just
know a lot
ours.
of adults like stickers, so maybe, if you were a sticker lover as a kid, maybe you need to give yourself a little sticker every day. And do you also recommend, say it's, you haven't worked out or you're not really good at moving your body, and or maybe like, when you sit down your computer you get distracted, but you're really good at what, do you recommend like kind of adding something on where it fits, or as
Mhm.
another alternative, like where something that you're already doing that you enjoy and you're like, oh, I'll be getting like the endorphins from being happy I did something, then I can
Mhm.
move on to the next text. I'm already in the mood to do that. Is that another option that you can do as well?
Yeah, so one thing that I like doing is I don't enjoy task switching, we call it in marketing or in business, right? I don't enjoy that as much as I enjoy working on one task per day. So you maybe on your calendar you have 3 things you need to get done per day, and on the next day you have maybe 3 other things. But having like 15 things on your to-do list, most likely you will not be able to accomplish them. It already sets you up for failure, right?
Yep.
So when you're working on your computer, look at those 3 things and try to really only work on those 3 things. So switch off notifications, switch off your phone, your email, anything. Notifications are really the enemy of productivity, I would say, right?
Yes, they are.
Because it constantly is that task switching where your brain has to go from, I was just on this product over here on this product design, but now I have to think about my email. And the more often you do it, the more tired you get. After a while, your brain is like working on overload because you're constantly going back and forth. It's kind of like, think about a kitchen. We have all these cooks, but they're usually on a station, right? They are working on desserts, and this person works on soups. Think about like you would do soups and desserts, how hard that would be. You constantly have to run back and forth, and that's kind of what your brain is doing. So don't put your brain on overload. Just do one thing at a time, finish that, go to the next thing, go to the next thing. It's totally fine to check your email in between. Maybe put on a timer for 5 minutes now. I can check my email and maybe walk while you check your email, walk around a little bit, and then sit back down and work on your next task. So the more focused you are, the more productivity you're going to see. There's no denying about that.
Yeah, because I think one of the things about, at least American culture is like all that you gotta work, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. And the truth that what we're learning from like research is we're not equipped to do, like, our brains can only do so much before we get tired. The same with our bodies. You wouldn't go to the gym and spend 8 hours there because you would not be able to move probably by the end of the day or the next day. So I think we need to move away from that idea of you have to accomplish everything in a day or a week. One, it's not possible. Two, no, you don't. And yeah, you need to just focus, like you said, on a few tasks a day, and that way you're not going to overwhelm yourself, because I think that's how you lose your motivation and get into a procrastination rut, is because you've overwhelmed yourself and you're tired and burnt out.
Yeah,
And
and I love that you use the word hustle. My podcast is called Happy Healthy Hustle, with the emphasis that we can hustle, but we can also be happy and we can also be healthy, right?
mhm.
So the hustle culture frequently has this negative connotation with it to where we feel it's just this go, go, go. But now keep in mind, you can be very, very productive. At the same time, it could be that you are spending a lot of time with friends and you really just focus on your friends, right? So
Mhm.
you're hustling for connection, you're hustling for building your network. And I always get very amused when I'm, for instance, at a restaurant or at a coffee shop and I look around and I see that a lot of people are sitting around a table and everybody looks at their phone. I nearly feel like going there and saying, why are you even here?
Right.
Because you have people sitting around you, which is a complete luxury, given that loneliness is a pandemic, right? I mean, maybe not the word pandemic, but it's an issue, loneliness and isolation. So you have people around you, you have friends. That's amazing. You should be very, very proud, and you should not make them feel disrespectful by looking at your phone and connect with people that are not sitting in front of you. Let's connect with them. Okay. So put your phone away, switch off those notifications, and actually build connection. If it's just for 10 or 15 minutes, make sure that you're honoring the time that you are spending with them. And I think that sometimes is where we feel we need to be everywhere at all time. That is really setting us up, and you just need to let go of that, because unfortunately, it's making you stretch so thin that you're really not being anywhere.
It's yeah, the working on being present when you are with your friends, with your family, even if you're just watching TV. Like I'm guilty of doing this. Is I'll like be watching TV and eating, and then I look at my phone. Now sometimes because I'm looking something up that was mentioned on the
Yeah.
show or whatever I'm watching because I want to learn more, then I usually pause it. But yeah, there are times where I'm like, wait a second, I have no idea what just happened in what I'm watching, or
Mhm.
I didn't enjoy the meal that I made myself because I was trying to do too many things. And then you're done and you're like, well, this wasn't fun. Or yeah, if you spend time with your friends and you're all on your phones and then you're like, I don't know what, nobody knows what's going on with me. I don't know what's going on with anyone else. And then you feel tired when really we need to work on being present, not multitasking all the time, and not feeling and redefining the way we think of
Mhm.
hustle, because it doesn't mean sitting in front of your computer for 10 hours. It can mean being out in the world. And there's also, I think, the power of saying no, right? Like you were saying, you don't need to be doing everything. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is be like, no, I'm not doing, no, I'm not going here.
Very good. Yeah. Um, I sometimes think, that the more you tell people what your limitations are, the more they will actually be attracted to you, right? So you could just tell, I'm tired. I'm not very good listener right now. Why don't you share with me how your day went, right? Because we have those situations to where you're like, I don't even know I can have a conversation right now, or what I feel is just scrolling on my phone. But just say, all right, I'm really tired. I'm exhausted. But at the same time, I would love to connect with you. So why don't you share with me how your day was? Sometimes you don't even have to talk at all, right? You could just do a puzzle together. There's no conversation needed, just sit down and get a good puzzle out or anything like that. So for me, social connection, sometimes people feel, but this is so exhausting and I don't like small talk and how to even find people and all this. It doesn't always have to go like by like a certain recipe. There's so many ways to connect with people without, making it always the same. Like you could go for a hike together, or you could do
Mhm.
those walks with somebody else. Or maybe you're connecting with people by meeting on Sundays and making meals for the week, because you all have to prepare the meals. So maybe on Sundays you have like a little meal club. So many ways to connect, and at the same time checking things off from your to-do list, because ideally that's how you should look at this. It's not adding things on, but rather you're maybe thinking about other people that have the same problem and joining that together and sharing that problem with them, right? So that's
Mhm.
really like when you're getting into like making yourself visible and making your wants visible, because ultimately when we have goals, we're not the only ones that want to do this, right?
Right. Well, and especially, if you do a task that like maybe you're like, I really hate working out, but if you have someone to go with you,
See.
like I have a friend that we used to, before she hurt herself, we used to walk all the time. And I love to be outside and walk, but it made the walk more enjoyable. And we would forget that we were like going further than we probably should have, because at the end we'd be like, I'm so tired. So we had to like be more conscious, but we were just enjoying the outdoors and each other, and like the meal prep. Yeah, getting together with friends and making something that might be a task that you just dread every week more fun and enjoyable, and then also getting the added bonus of hanging out with people that you care about, or even getting to know new people who are maybe struggling with the same thing that you are. I think that's a really great idea that I think a lot of people forget, that you don't have to go it alone. You can
Completely.
find someone to do it with.
So I'm part of a book club, for instance, and I love reading, but at the same time, sometimes I don't know what to read. And because I don't know what to read, I'm like in this stalling pattern. Well, I'm like, I don't know what to read. And so I'm going to think about it and then I don't read, which is horrible, right? So what my book club helps me with is we pick out a book and then we read it. And we don't all have to love it again, but at least, it gets me reading. And on my blog, I have a blog article that talks about just that if you read 5, 10, or 15 minutes per day, you'll be amazed how many books you will actually read by the end of 1 year. So, check out my blog and that little calculator I created, because sometimes you think, oh, this is just 5 minutes. But if you look at the overall year or even 90 days, you'll be amazed how things really stack up in terms of habits, those petite practices, how they build something much bigger that you ultimately want to achieve, right? Let's say
Mhm.
you want to read 10 books per year. Well, let's break this down and let's see how many pages would that be, maybe per week, right? The main thing is whenever we have goals is to really make it as a small digestible unit as possible, and then make it, of course, part of your daily or weekly routine so you can actually live with it and you can work with it, and then you're really internalizing it. And we all have different habits, but it has to be you. It has to be you wanting to do this, and you have to be on board with it, and then it's really becoming a part of something much bigger.
Yeah, I was reading actually that your blog post about reading 15 minutes a day. Last year, last year I was like, I really want to read more, and so put the book by my bed. I would like set goals for myself of, okay, I want to read this many pages. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I read more, and it made me fall in love with reading again. Because when I lived in New York and Chicago, it was very easy because I was taking the subway to work or the bus. And so I was sitting there and I would read. And now that I live in Atlanta, I'm not commuting because I work for myself. So I have to make it a priority. And it was really great. And a book club is great too, because you have people to talk about the book, but a lot of times you might discover a genre that you didn't realize that you like to read. Sometimes, yes, there are books you're like, this is terrible, I don't like it, which is fine. But you can do virtual book clubs. I'm in a networking group and we have a virtual book club, and it's I mean, I miss the in person because I feel like it's easier to connect. But there are options if you are struggling to find a book club or whatever it is that you're interested in. Even if you're an introvert like me, you can you can
Or
take
like,
baby steps to
yeah,
get.
all my clients that work with me, they always say, because I talk so much about books, that they become really curious about it, right? They're like, oh man, you just mentioned this when you explained this principle that you read this in this book. Can you share this book with me? And that's ideally really what happens, that you take a little bit from there, a little bit from there, and you make it part of, what is it in it for me? Why did I read this? Oh, because it really brought a smile to my face. Oh, because I learned something new, or because it reminded me of a place where I've been before. So also look at books as something, it's like a journey of the mind, right? You're traveling and you're maybe letting your mind wander and not be stressed out. You don't necessarily always need to be, thinking about like, oh, how is this going to be like furthering my career or something? If you have a certain genre you like to read, that's great, because the more you read, there's this famous saying, right? The more you read, the more you know, and the more you know, the more you actually line up with who you're really supposed to be, your superpower, as I call it, right?
Mhm.
So I think that sharing a love for reading does not mean that we are sharing the same type of books that we are reading.
Right. And listening to a book, some people say it's not reading, it is reading, if that's because it's also something you can do, while you're cleaning the house or when you're going on a walk, or if you have trouble sleeping. So, I sometimes will listen to books. I set the timer because otherwise if I fall asleep, I'm like, I forget where I was. But there are lots of ways to get in, read great books. And also I think when you're like with a book club or any kind of club, you'll meet people where like we'll talk about things that are like, oh, I didn't think about that, and they might have interest that you become interested in, or tips for achieving your goals or being more productive, or or someone that you can like, hey, let's meet at a coffee shop and work on this for an hour or whatever, and get you out of the house and get you to do the task, and then you can have fun and reward yourself with a coffee or a chai or a treat or whatever that you enjoy. Speaking of that, do you think rewarding yourself with, I mean, it doesn't have to be food, but do you think setting, when you achieve a certain part of your goal, giving yourself a reward or a treat helps with motivation?
Yeah, actually, I was going to come to that too, because we talked earlier about the little star system, and I mentioned the trackers that I create. I think it's so important. Quite honestly, whenever I meet with my clients and I coach them, I have set up my whole coaching as like all gamified, right? So I do word searches with them whenever we accomplish something. We search for words that I explained in my coaching. Well, we do little quizzes that give them like little profiles, kind of like the BuzzFeed style quizzes. And you wouldn't believe it. Sometimes, people like, oh, we're doing the word searches today. And all what I mentioned right now is like, as you said, non-food related. The more you can gamify something that you're trying to learn or that you're trying to grow in, right? So ultimately, we want to grow whenever we adopt a goal, the more you will actually look forward to it, because you're going to look forward to doing the word search, because when you do the word search that you finish your, let's say, brand board or your sales funnel, because the word search will come afterwards. And I think that there are certain ways that we sometimes disregard that we were a child at one point, and that people kind of lose that playfulness about themselves. And that's sometimes unfortunate, because we all like doing certain things, like whether that's like mention like the little stars or mentioning like high fives or anything. And that's so important to build that culture again, to kind of like say, all right, I need to tap into rewarding myself for little things. And it does not have to cost anything. It doesn't have to even, I say no cost, no calories, and maybe no complication. It could be super easy, right? The more you have something like that, the more actually you're setting yourself up for success, because it does not have to be, something that's necessarily making you feel bad when you reward yourself. It should actually be something where you feel this is another stepping stone in reaching my journey, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny that when you were talking, I was thinking the same thing about when we were kids. What, cleaning your room, or
Mhm.
you had a chore chart, or even in
Yeah.
school they would make things a game. Like I remember, um there was like math champ and spelling champ, and it was all about it. It made you like, I have to win. Like I'm not great at math, but I remember telling my mom, I think it was like third grade, I'm like, I've won spelling champ, I have to win math champ. So
Mhm.
I really worked on like whatever, and I did, because I worked with her. It was like multiplication tables or something. I was like, I have to win. And but it made it fun. It was, I mean, you don't have to always be competitive with other people, but, and then we also had like reading books. It was, I mean, it was a food reward. It was paired with Pizza Hut, but it was a cool thing because you had this little button, and you put stars on it, and when you got all of them, you got to go to Pizza Hut and get your little personal pan pizza. And it was, it was something to look forward to. My brother and sister and I, we like were very excited about it. So yeah, there are things you can do to make it fun, because when you become an adult, you're like, oh God, adulting, it's so exhausting.
Mhm.
No one told me I was going to have to do A through Z, 1 through 100. And if you make it a little more fun, then every task doesn't have to feel like such a
Yeah.
chore. You don't have to dread
So
it.
in my coaching, again, I mentioned the word search and I mentioned the little trackers. I actually give out little tickets. And the ticket is kind of like a little stamp in a passport because I'm very passionate about Europe and Paris in particular. So each ticket fits what we just learned. Let's say we learned brand design, and I pair that with, say, the Eiffel Tower, which is very unique for Paris, right? So
Mhm.
people earn the tickets whenever they complete certain tasks. But now what I want to say is what's so important about that is that all of a sudden you're feeling like I'm part of a team because we're not competing against each other, but we are cheering each other on and completing this together. And I'm learning a little bit something about Christiana because my coach is really passionate about Paris and the Eiffel Tower was created this way and blah, blah, blah. And so it's make your reward also something that maybe ties it in with something of another piece of connection right there. And
Mhm.
the more you do that, the better. And at the same time, of course, what I like about rewards is that when you look back at your 90-day plan and you see that you have these rewards along the way, that should be a really good feeling right there. Because you're like, oh my gosh, look what I all accomplished. You could even on a daily basis in your journal write down 3 wins today. What are the 3 things I accomplished today? And then you see how your little reward journal or something grows. And then when you have, like, say, a week of 3 wins, right? So maybe go and do something special after that one first week of 3 wins. And those wins could be super small. It could just be I got up in the morning and
Right.
I brushed my teeth. I mean, it does not have to be complicated, like don't make the wins like, something that's out of this mind big, the small things.
Which plays into, I think, a lot mindset, because I think that's where people also struggle, is that you have to have a mind, your mindset has to be focused on I don't want to say achieving as like, because sometimes that can be considered negative, but like your mindset has to be focused on moving forward and doing stuff and being, like cheering yourself on too. And if you feel bad because you're like, well, all I did today was get out of bed and brush my teeth. Well, that's okay. Some days we all have days where some days that's the best you can do is
Mhm.
make your bed or take a shower, brush your teeth, and that's fine. And I think if you can making gamifying things, writing, accomplishments down can help improve your mindset. Because yeah, if you're having a bad day or a bad week, you can look back and go, wait a second, I did all these things. So I am doing something. And then you don't feel so bad about the bad days.
I love that you bring up the making your bed. The making your bed, I realized with my clients in the past, is a tremendous, tremendous progress. Making the bed transitions, especially when you work from home, transitions your mind on like end of sleep time, beginning of daytime. I'm going to start working. If you never make your bed during the day, there's a lot of research studies that show that you're actually never really telling your body there's that switch. I'm going, excuse me, I'm going into work mode. So that's a huge win.
It's funny because when I was a kid, I used to argue with my mother about making bed. I'm like, but I'm just gonna make it a mess later. And so now when I make the bed, I was like, oh yeah, she was right. Because it does. It's like, okay, I'm done sleeping, moving on. And also it just makes your room look so much nicer and cleaner. And then when you come home at the end of the day, you're like, oh, my bed's already made. I can just crawl in. I don't have to do it. Or yeah. Mindset is so important too. And I think Gen Xers, well, everybody, but like I think our Gen X generation, like we never were taught mindset practices because we were just told like, I'm glad you have feelings. I don't care. Suck it up. Just do what I tell you to do. Like just yeah, that's life's hard, and I think we have to kind of reframe the way we think about being in midlife and accomplishing things. And and if we don't want to if you don't want to do something, like there's some tasks that you really hate,
Mhm.
um and you can afford it. Maybe like if you don't like cleaning your house and you can afford it, get someone to come clean your house, because then you can do a task that you actually enjoy doing. Maybe you enjoy laundry, but you don't enjoy cleaning the bathroom. Hire, someone to do it for you.
Yeah, ask for help is important.
Yes.
Or, I mean, think about with AI now, right? So we have this little robot that goes around and cleans the floors in our house, like it's this little Roomba thing. Or, yeah, I mean, in general, sometimes, again, speaking about the petite practices, if you wait a really long time, that task that you don't like doing is really horrible.
Yep.
If you don't like cleaning your house, how about every day you tidy things up a little bit so that the
Mhm.
cleaning your house is not this atrocious thing that takes like a whole day, but it may just take like an hour because you kind of tidy things up a little bit every day. So it is this big because in general, people are like, oh, but I really don't like cleaning the sinks. Well, instead of every day leaving like a ginormous mess, maybe every evening you kind of wipe it down. You have like this little rag next to the sink and you wipe things down. Or like people are like, oh, I don't know how to build a sales funnel. Well, instead of like, starting from scratch, maybe like every day you work on this for 5 minutes and you start writing down what elements you already have in place. And then it's not so bad. So that's so important that you create habits that make this big thing that you don't like doing less scary. So you're taking down a little bit of the friction in accomplishing that big goal, right? What would make it easier for me to get there?
And then also it becomes a habit if you're like, okay, I hate cleaning my sink, but every day after I finish doing my skincare routine and brushing my teeth, I wipe down the counter. Maybe that's one week. The next week, like, okay, I wiped down the counter and the sink. And then it just becomes a part of your nighttime routine because I think what makes tasks really challenging, whether it's for your home or for your business, is when you keep putting it off. And then it becomes this, like you say, this huge thing. You're like, I don't know where to tackle it. And then you become overwhelmed. And if you break it down into small, actionable steps that become a habit, then you're not overwhelmed. Speaking of overwhelmed, because as a business owner, because I'm a business owner, I have this podcast, and I'm a single person, so I have to do pretty much everything. And sometimes I get very overwhelmed, as a lot of people do, because we're juggling a lot of things. And I feel like sometimes that can make you kind of like paralyze you, and you're like, I don't know where to start, I don't know what to do. Um, do you have tips for when you have those days or those weeks where the overwhelm is just it's so much that you just like you kind of shut down and you don't know what to do?
For sure. And we all have that. Or we might have the days where you work on things, but somehow you feel like at the end of the day, I don't even know what I really did today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is actually a famous book by an athlete, and she said, my life comes in threes, right? I might have a great day. The next day, the very next day after this great day might be terrible. I don't feel well. I don't feel like doing anything. And then the third day might be like the so day, right? You have to keep that in mind that this is the way that our life is, right? So there might be a great day. You're publishing a podcast, you're cleaning your house, you're going grocery shopping, you're like on a roll. And then on the next day, you really don't do anything. And that's totally all right because you had that one day. And then on the third day, maybe you do a little bit of something, right? So keep in mind that we are no machines. We are not performing at all speed all the time. And you need to kind of be generous with yourself and giving yourself room to create boundaries for when you might need to be that introvert that does not leave the house because it's just what feels good on that day, right? So the
Yes.
more you connect with what you feel and what you need on that day, the better. And that will also help with your overwhelm because the overwhelm sometimes comes from the fact that we put these completely irrational to-do lists on ourselves that you would not even accomplish if you would be like a twin or a triplet of yourself, right? So you need to think of yourself. It's like, is it really feasible that every day I can tick off 4 things on my to-do list? It's really not, right? And you just need to give yourself permission. All right, today, not productive. Moving on. And maybe on those non-productive days, that's when you grab a book and you read and give yourself permission for that, right? Or maybe on the non-productive days, think a little bit, my body feels like it needs that today. So on the next day, maybe I'm going to feel much better. That's all right.
Right. Because I think rest is definitely something, not a task, but it should be a priority. That it's not only okay, it's necessary for us to rest, to get sleep, and to sometimes have days where our only task is to sit on the couch and binge watch Netflix or read or just lay there and just be, because we can't, you can't function if your body and your brain are exhausted. Because we've all had those days where, like, okay, I worked out too hard, my body hurts, or I worked too hard the day before, my brain is tired, and I know I'm not going to be productive. And instead of making ourselves feel bad, we should go, okay, I'm going to listen to my brain, I'm going to listen to my body, and I'm going to take it easy and just read or do whatever I love to do. And
Yeah,
that
I
could
have
be
a
taking
fun
a nap.
story for you from a client that traveled abroad actually to take a vacation, right? And
Hmm.
so I checked in with her when she came back, and I said, "Oh, so how was your vacation? Do you feel all rejuvenated?" And she said, "Christiane, I realized something that you told me, and it really kind of connected with something I was doing wrong." So I was traveling abroad and I was trying to take pictures and post them on Instagram and really fill in the world and what I'm doing. And then I was like, taking pictures of my food and maybe posting that to Pinterest and all this. And all of a sudden I looked up and I was like, what in the world am I doing? The goal of traveling abroad was so I can relax. And I have all these things that I'm doing. I'm like, like you know, a traveling social media manager. And all of a sudden I thought, this all has time. I can do this when I come back. Right now, my goal was to rest and relax. So maybe I don't have my phone in my hand. And maybe I take a picture of the food, or maybe I don't. Right? I mean, like you can just take a picture with your eyes. Or sometimes we also feel that when we are relaxing, we are resting, we still need to be on, and that other people might be wondering what's up with you right now. Absolutely not. You could disappear from social media and nobody might even miss you, which sounds horrible, but it's actually true. And then you come back, you're like, yep, I unplugged. And everybody like, oh my gosh, so good for you. Yeah, you don't need to share that ahead of time. I'm going to be gone for a few days. Not necessary. You don't own anybody an excuse if you want to take the day off and not document your life for us. It's totally all right.
Yes. Especially when you travel, like I have a friend, like she will just take pictures of everything. And I'm like, can we just enjoy where we're
Yes.
being? And I'm more purposeful, where I will take a picture of something because I'm like, I just feel called to do it. And then when I look back at those pictures, I actually remember that moment because it was so special. Like I just went on a trip with my brother and sister and brother-in-law and niece and nephew. We went skiing. Well, they went skiing. And it was like the last day, and my sister and I were driving back from going to Breckenridge, where we just ended up turning around because we couldn't find parking. We drove around for an hour. But on the way back, we were staying on the lake and the sun was just coming through the mountains. It was so gorgeous. And I was like, I need to take a picture of this. And I'm like, do you mind if I turn around? She goes, no. So we went and we took a picture, and then she and I took a selfie, and I will treasure that moment. And then I was showing my brother and my brother-in-law the pictures, and like, oh, those pictures are so cool. So that means more to me than the picture, but I will have that memory. And I think that's a very, like, another reminder to be present in what you're doing, especially in your time off. Like, you're on vacation, nobody cares about the food you're eating unless it's something weird. You don't have to document every single moment. It's like the people who go to concerts. Like, there's some influencers I follow, and they'll just show the whole. I'm like, I don't need to see the whole concert. Did you enjoy the concert yourself?
Yeah, you look through the camera at the artist. Did you actually look at the artist minus the camera? This is so bizarre. Will you ever watch this on your phone? No,
No.
most likely no, right? So why did you even do this?
Yeah, like I mean, there's like your favorite song. You're like, oh, I want to like take a picture or a little video. Fine, but then enjoy where you are, and especially being somewhere with other people, enjoying this cool experience. And yeah, that I don't. I mean, I know when people have kids, it's different because you're like you want to capture every moment, but still, we need to be present in what we're doing, because otherwise, you do look back at things and go, I don't remember this. I know I took a picture of it. I don't know what happened. I don't know why I took a picture of this, and I'll never look at this again. So, yeah. Well, we're almost at our end of our time, but I wanted to ask you, in addition to like writing stuff down in your planner, or setting like little reminders on your phone, do you have any favorite tools or apps or software that you use to help you with your goal setting, or to be efficiently productive, or to keep your motivation up?
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously, when I wrote my book, the How to Master Your Goals book, I wedged everything in there, right? That I could, so to speak, right? So using small tasks, I call them the petite practices, really helps breaking things down. Using, small games, whether that's the word searches that I use in my book, they're in my book, or using little tickets that you earn when you walk through the book. And all these will help. In addition to that is, of course, I really like to sell the book as a paper book
Mhm.
so that you have it with you. And that makes it also neat. It has the same size as the laptop.
Oh,
You can
nice.
even have it right next to your laptop as your workbook right there. And it makes it a little bit more of a, okay, here's my electronic workstation and here's my paper workstation right there. And they go hand in hand right there. And there are planners in there. There's even like exercises where you build your personal mantra, for instance. Things that really connect with you and make you teach something about yourself you didn't know before. So my favorite recommendation is when you really want to reach your goals, you have to do it really in a way that you feel it's traveling with you, right? So you're taking things with you, yeah, while the phone might be handy, that's why I'm like really emphasizing like buy like a paper planner,
Mhm.
buy the book that I created because you want to have something in your hands you can touch, that you wrote down with a pen because it will build connection completely differently than just looking at a screen on your phone or on your laptop.
Very true, especially as Gen Xers, like, we all remember the days when you'd get, the worksheet. Of course, we would smell it because of the lovely ink scent. It was
Yeah.
probably toxic, but we are used to writing things down, and I'm a writer, and I have a planner, I have notebooks for different things, and, journals. There's a different feeling when you write it down, especially, and I hope that, the younger generation get to experience that too, because technology is great, but there's not the same connection as when you put pen to paper. So,
Thank
well,
you.
thank you so much for being on here. If I will definitely include your book and a link to your podcast and other things that were mentioned. But if people would like to work with you or connect with you, where's the best place to send them?
Yeah, so go to my website, hellohappynest.com. And of course, yeah, go to my podcast. We talked about the name Happy Healthy Hustle. And yeah, check out my book. It's available on Amazon, How to Master Your Goals. And I would love to connect with you. Also, when you get my book, there are a few fun bonuses you get with the purchase of it, like that amazing tracker and all these games that I talked about to make your life really super fun and make this your year, right?
Right. Great. Well, and I will include all of that, of course, in the show notes. And thank you, and Christiane, for being here. It was such great to talk to you. And I hope this helps everyone that now we're in February and that you don't have to give up on your resolution or your goals. It's something you can do at any time. And she has great tools to make it a lot more easier and more efficient. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And that concludes the first episode of our 2025 season. Thank you again to Dr. Christiane Schroeter for speaking with us and for giving us some very actionable steps and tools for making goal setting feel less intimidating, for helping with overwhelm and motivation and reducing procrastination. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to Christiane. All of her information will be in the show notes. And stay tuned for our next episode coming later this month, where we'll talk about what goal setting and productivity, what that meant as Gen Xers. Was that even a thing? But you'll note, like, I think it was fun to reminisce a little in this episode about, the gamification of tasks that we had when we were kids. So maybe we'll dive a little more into that. And until And until next time, my fellow Gen Xers, I'll leave you the way I always do. Don't you forget about me, because I won't forget about you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Gen X Experience. If today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it on social media or with a friend. We'll see you back here next time.